So, uh, you walk into a grocery store.
Right.
It's basically a completely mundane routine, something you probably do every week without even giving it a second thought. You grab a cart, you walk down the aisles, you check the price tag on a carton of eggs.
Yeah, just everyday stuff.
Exactly. And maybe on your way out, you notice a help wanted sign taped to the front sliding door. Now, it is a shared objective physical space, but our mission today is exploring this deeply fascinating, almost reality-bending phenomenon that our stack of sources highlights.
It really is wild when you get into it.
It is, because two people can walk through those exact same sliding doors, look at the exact same carton of eggs, read the exact same job listing, and come away with two completely opposite conclusions about the invisible forces shaping their lives. One person sees an environment of ultimate freedom and opportunity, and the other. The other sees a landscape defined by coercion and, well, structural traps. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at the raw source material to understand the architecture of a debate that quite literally defines our modern world. And just to be clear, we are completely impartial here.
Oh, absolutely. We aren't taking political sides today.
Right.
Because as you dig into the research here, it becomes clear we are not just haggling over tax brackets or, the best way to stimulate GDP growth.
No, it's way bigger than that.
It's a fundamental clash over the nature of reality itself. It's about how human beings perceive their environment, how we define fairness, where invisible power actually lives, and really whether the world you navigate every day is inherently fair or basically rigged from the start.
And to get to the bottom of why two reasonable people can inhabit such different realities, our sources point us toward a single word. And this word is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting.
Oh yeah, one little word.
The word is free, as in, the free market. Right.
Because how a person defines that single concept essentially builds the foundation for their entire political and economic worldview.
It really does. So let's look at the baseline of the traditional economic worldview, what the texts refer to as the believer.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does the believer actually believe?
Well, for the believer, freedom has a very specific, almost mathematical definition. It means the absence of direct government or interpersonal coercion.
Okay, so no one is physically forcing you to do anything.
Exactly. If no one is pointing a weapon at your head and forcing you to take that job at the grocery store or forcing you to buy that specific carton of organic eggs, then the transaction is voluntary.
Right.
And because it is voluntary, it is, by definition, free.
I see the appeal of that definition because it's incredibly clean. It makes me think of the market as like a natural ecosystem.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You have millions of organisms, buyers, sellers, workers, employers, all just interacting organically. And through those organic interactions, they find a natural equilibrium.
You don't need a park ranger out there telling the bees which flowers to pollinate or telling the wolves how to hunt. The ecosystem just manages itself perfectly well without any top-down interference.
And that ecosystem analogy is actually deeply rooted in the historical context of our sources, specifically going back to Adam Smith.
Right, the classic.
Yeah, you're touching on his famous concept of the invisible hand, but the mechanism here is crucial. Smith's argument wasn't just that people are selfish.
Wait, really? Because I feel like that's how it's always explained.
Well, it was that individual self-interest, when forced to operate through voluntary exchange, organically produces socially beneficial outcomes.
Okay, so it channels the selfishness into something good.
Exactly. The baker doesn't wake up at 4 a.m. to bake bread out of the goodness of his heart, right? He does it because he wants to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
But the mechanical result of his self-interest is that the town gets fed.
Wait, let me test that. Are we saying that for the believer, selfishness magically translates to societal good just because a transaction happens?
I mean, it's not magic, it's coordination. And that coordination mechanism was expanded on brilliantly by the economist Friedrich Hayek.
Ah.
Hayek brought information theory into the mix. He argued that a modern economy is so vastly, overwhelmingly complex that no centralized bureaucracy could ever possibly manage it.
Like no group of brilliant government planners could figure it out.
Right, because they can't ever possibly know what millions of dispersed individuals know about their own lives.
Yeah, because a planner in a government office has absolutely no idea that I suddenly decided to switch from dairy milk to oat milk on a random Tuesday, let alone what 300 million other people are doing.
Exactly. And what if there's a drought where the oats are grown? What if a major shipping port shuts down? How does the system adapt without a central authority dictating rations?
So how does it adapt?
Well, Hayek pointed out that the market processes all of this invisible, dispersed knowledge through a single, highly efficient mechanism: prices.
Oh, okay, so prices aren't just arbitrary numbers.
No, high prices aren't just an annoyance, they are a flare gun. If a freeze hits Mexico, the price of avocados in Ohio spikes.
Right.
That high price signals consumers to buy fewer avocados and maybe buy tomatoes instead.
And it probably signals farmers too, right?
Exactly. It signals farmers in other regions to plant more avocados because it's suddenly profitable, and it signals truckers to rush shipments to meet the demand. Millions of isolated human decisions are coordinated instantly by a number on a sign.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm understanding the believer's worldview correctly, it's not just an obsession with making money.
No, not at all.
It's a moral stance. The argument is that markets are emergent, self-correcting, and morally just. Because if everything is truly voluntary, the system rewards merit and efficiency.
Yes.
It takes power away from a centralized state and disperses it out to the millions of everyday people making daily choices.
That is the absolute core of it. In this view, inequality isn't necessarily evidence of exploitation. It's largely a reflection of different contributions, skills, or, choices.
Right, the market is just a neutral umpire calling balls and strikes.
Exactly, which is why the believer views regulation with such deep suspicion. Every time a government steps in to control a price or mandate a behavior, they are jamming the radar.
They're messing with the flare gun.
Right. They are replacing incredibly efficient natural market signals with highly inefficient political ones. And those political signals are almost always prone to being captured by special interests.
Okay, but, and I have to push back here, if this ecosystem is so beautifully self-correcting, why do I constantly see people working full-time jobs who can barely afford to keep the lights on?
Right.
Where does this perfect ecosystem break down? And I guess this brings us to the perspective of the market skeptic. Because the skeptic looks at that exact same grocery store, the exact same organic interactions, and sees something drastically different.
Totally different.
They don't see a natural ecosystem. They see a meticulously walled garden where someone else owns the land, controls the water supply, and charges admission just to breathe.
And that completely upends the believer's definition of the word voluntary.
How so?
Well, the skeptic argues that the believer's definition of freedom, simply the absence of a gun to your head, is dangerously incomplete.
Okay.
For a choice to be meaningfully free, it requires more than just the absence of physical force. It requires real, viable alternatives. It requires transparent information.
Right, you need to actually know what you're choosing.
Exactly. And crucially, it requires roughly equal bargaining power between the two parties making the exchange. The skeptic is looking for the presence of structural coercion.
Hold on, I want to play devil's advocate here based on the text.
Go for it.
If I desperately need a job and I sign a contract to work for minimum wage, no one literally forced me. From a purely mechanical standpoint, I signed the paper. I could have walked away. How does the skeptic argue that's coercive?
Well, the skeptic would ask you, walked away to what? Right. If your only alternative to taking that notoriously low-paying job is homelessness or not being able to feed your kids, your signature on that contract isn't an expression of freedom.
It's an expression of survival.
Exactly. It's survival under duress. The structural coercion is the threat of starvation. The skeptic observes that the believer treats the market like a level playing field, while totally ignoring that some players arrived in helicopters, while others had to claw their way over a barbed wire fence.
That makes total sense. It reminds me of trying to cancel a notoriously shady gym membership.
Oh, the worst.
Right. Sure, you freely entered the contract. But the gym made signing up take 2 clicks on an app, while canceling requires a notarized letter, a blood sample, and a visit to a cancellation office that is only open every 3rd Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
You aren't being held at gunpoint, but the environment has been structurally designed to strip you of your agency.
That's a perfect example of asymmetry. And the sources highlight several massive structural imbalances that the skeptic sees in the broader economy. First, entry into the supposedly free market is heavily gated.
Gated how?
Well, you want to start a business to compete. You need capital, you need professional credentials, you need access to social networks. None of these things are distributed equally at birth.
Yeah, that's true.
The believer says, go get a bank loan. The skeptic says, statistically, the loan goes to the person whose family already has collateral, not the person starting from zero.
Right, the table isn't actually open to everyone.
Not at all. Then you look at the participants, you have massive corporations spending billions of dollars on lobbying.
Oh, yeah. The political side?
Right. They use their market success to buy political influence and then use that influence to rewrite zoning laws, secure subsidies, and create regulatory moats that explicitly prevent new competitors from challenging them.
Wow.
So when a consumer freely chooses the monopolist's product, it's only because the monopolist legally suffocated all the alternatives.
It's like sitting down to a high-stakes poker game. But the other player isn't just trying to outplay you. They own the casino, they can see your cards, and they have the legal authority to rewrite the rules between hands.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that power dynamic is especially glaring when you look at wage negotiations.
As so.
The texts emphasize that wages are rarely a negotiation between equals. On one side, you have a single vulnerable individual who needs to pay rent by Friday. On the other side, you have a massive organization with legal teams, endless capital, and the absolute ability to just wait.
Oh, right, because the corporation can leave a position open for 6 months.
Yeah. And the individual cannot go 6 months without eating. That is a staggering asymmetry in bargaining power, yet the believer's model treats them as two equal parties making a mutual exchange.
And there's information asymmetry too, right?
Right.
Like the company selling you a used car or a complex financial product almost always has infinitely more data about its flaws than you do.
Oh, absolutely.
So does the skeptic just want to burn the whole thing down? Do they hate the concept of buying and selling entirely?
No, and this is a crucial distinction made in the research. Many skeptics don't hate markets.
Okay.
They recognize that markets are incredibly useful coordination mechanisms for distributing goods. What they reject entirely is the ideological claim that existing markets are neutral, natural phenomena like gravity that humans simply discovered.
Right, because we build them.
Yes. The skeptic argues that the free market is a social and legal construct. Humans built it. Humans wrote the property laws, the patent laws, the zoning restrictions, and therefore the market inherently reflects the biases and interests of the powerful people who wrote those rules.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have completely laid out these two different realities. But how do two smart people look at the exact same data, say a company laying off 1,000 workers while the CEO gets a massive bonus, and process it so differently?
Right.
We have to dig into how they measure fairness itself.
And this is what the sources identify as the epistemological divide. It's fundamentally a debate about what constitutes justice.
Okay, break that down for me.
Believers are heavily process-focused. For them, if the rules of the game were followed, if contracts were honored, if no one committed outright fraud, and if the exchanges were voluntary, then the outcome is inherently legitimate.
Got it. The justice lives in the process of the transaction.
Exactly.
So to make that concrete,
Yeah.
if the company legally followed all labor laws and severance agreements during those 1,000 layoffs, the believer sees the CEO's bonus as fair, even if the visual outcome feels, jarring.
Yes,
Let
exactly.
me try an analogy. It's like a
Yeah.
foot race.
Yeah.
The believer is standing exclusively at the starting line. They're watching the runners take off and asking, did anyone jump the gun? Did anyone trip another runner? If the answer is no, the race was fair, regardless of who wins.
Yeah, that's spot on. And the skeptic takes that exact same race, but they are standing at the finish line looking at the results. They are completely outcome focused.
Right.
If one runner finishes an hour ahead of everyone else, the believer says, great, they ran a perfect race. But the skeptic says, wait a minute, why did half the runners have to run through mud while wearing lead boots, and why did the winner get to run on a paved track?
Because to the skeptic, if the ultimate outcome is that millions of people cannot afford basic medical care while a handful accumulate more wealth than entire nations, the outcome itself proves that the process is flawed.
Exactly. The result is the evidence of structural coercion, regardless of how voluntary the individual steps appeared to be.
Which leads to what the texts call the baseline debate, right?
Yes. When we argue about government intervention, what baseline are we comparing reality to? Free market believers generally treat our current reality, or something very close to it, as the baseline of what is free.
Okay.
But skeptics push back hard on this. They argue that a genuinely free market one with absolutely perfect information, zero monopoly power, no unpriced external costs like pollution, and totally equal bargaining power, well, it has never actually existed in the history of human civilization.
Wait, really? Wow. So the skeptic is saying the believer's ecosystem is basically a myth. Yeah. It's a purely theoretical ideal that exists in textbooks, but is used as a shield to justify current power dynamics and protect the wealthy.
Yes. But, before we get totally lost in the abstract philosophy, the sources highlight something incredibly grounding.
What's that?
Well, why do you, as a listener, lean toward one side of this debate or the other? It usually isn't because you read Adam Smith or Karl Marx in college.
Right, most people haven't.
Exactly. It's deeply, intimately rooted in your own lived experience. The anchor of this philosophical clash is what has actually happened to you in your life.
I think this is the most powerful part of the entire deep dive. The text maps this divide flawlessly onto real life.
Yeah.
Let's look at two specific realities.
Okay.
Imagine you start a tech company. You work incredibly hard, late nights, endless stress. But you were able to start it because you had $100,000 in seed money from your family and a safety net so you wouldn't starve if it failed. You build it, you sell it, you succeed. That person genuinely, truly experiences the market as a responsive, meritocratic system.
Mm.
Their hard work directly translated to reward. The ecosystem worked exactly as promised.
Now, contrast that with the second reality. Imagine someone who works 3 different jobs, puts in crushing hours of physical labor, never sees their kids, and still gets completely wiped out financially because of a single unexpected medical bill.
Yeah.
That person genuinely, truly experiences the market as a system that is entirely indifferent to hard work. They put in maximum effort, and the system gave them nothing but precarity in return. To them, the game is demonstrably rigged.
And the thing is, both of those lived experiences are 100% real. The successful founder isn't lying about their late nights and sacrifices. And the exhausted worker isn't lying about the crushing weight of the system.
Right.
They're speaking from two entirely different empirical realities.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is why the two sides constantly talk past each other. When the believer tells the skeptic, you just need to work harder, the market rewards effort, it sounds to the skeptic like literal gaslighting.
Because their daily life proves that statement false.
Exactly. And conversely, when the skeptic tells the believer, your success is just the result of structural privilege and an unfair system, it sounds to the believer like a hostile invalidation of their genuine sweat and tears.
So what does this all mean for you? Why does it matter if we see a beautiful ecosystem or a rigged casino?
It matters a lot.
It really does. Because this philosophical clash dictates the actual on-the-ground rules of our society. It dictates policy. Think about minimum wage laws, rent control, or wealth taxes. Believers largely oppose these interventions. But, and this is a critical point to understand the architecture of this debate, they don't oppose them out of cruelty. They oppose them because they genuinely believe that things like rent control distort the very price signals that Hayek talked about.
Right, the flare gun.
Exactly. They believe that if you mess with the thermometer, you break the system and ultimately harm the very people you were trying to help.
The believer sees intervention as throwing a wrench into a delicate, vital machine, but the skeptic supports those exact same interventions. And again, not because they hate freedom or want to punish success.
Right.
They support a higher minimum wage or rent control because they believe the market's initial outcomes were never the product of genuine freedom to begin with. To the skeptic, deliberate democratic intervention isn't breaking the machine.
It's fixing it.
Yes. It is the only way to manually correct for the coercion baked into the system. It's required to achieve the fairness that market ideology promises, but structurally fails to deliver.
It's a clash of solutions because it is fundamentally a clash of diagnoses. You can't agree on a cure if you don't agree on the disease.
Exactly. But if we pull back, the texts remind us of a core underlying empathy that gets totally lost in political yelling.
Yeah, which is so important to remember.
Both sides actually want prosperity. Both sides want human freedom, however they define it. Both sides want people to be able to live dignified, fulfilling lives.
They just have completely irreconcilable frameworks for understanding what power looks like when it doesn't announce itself with a uniform or a weapon.
Yeah. They are looking at the exact same grocery store, the exact same economy, and seeing two entirely different invisible architectures.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with. Building on the skeptic's claim that a truly perfect, friction-free market has never actually existed.
The idea that it's a theoretical ideal rather than our current lived reality.
Right. If that genuinely free market is just a ghost, a myth that has never actually materialized in human history, are both the believers and the skeptics ultimately fighting over an illusion?
Wow.
And if they are, here's the question for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends. Is the illusion of a free market the only psychological glue keeping our incredibly complex, deeply unequal society from fracturing entirely? Or is clinging to that illusion exactly the thing that prevents us from building something actually better?
That is a profound tension. And it fundamentally changes how you view every transaction you make.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Tomorrow, when you walk into a grocery store or buy a coffee or sit down to negotiate a salary, take a look around the room and ask yourself, which reality are you participating in? We will see you next time.